In this lecture, I'd like to introduce you to a really cool framework called Beef. Beef is short for the Browser Exploitation Framework. It allows us to run a number of attacks on hooked browsers that would allow us to further exploit the target system to steal passwords or even gain full access or full control over this system. So right here, I'm at my Kali machine, and we can go ahead and start Beef. To do that, I'm going to click on all my applications. I'm going to type Beef, and I'm going to click on the first icon in here, Beef Start. You can use the Beef Stop to stop it, but right now we just want to start the framework, so we're going to click on the Start. Now, because this is the first time we run the framework, it's asking us to set a password for the default user. So go ahead and pick any password you want. And note, when you type the password, you will not see the characters on screen. This is a security feature so that the people around you will not see your password. So right now I actually typed my password, but you can't see anything on screen. I'm just going to hit enter, and then it'll automatically start the Beef framework for me, and it'll automatically start Firefox and go to the web interface that we can use to access Beef and control the hooked browsers. As you can see, the first thing that it'll ask us is a username and a password to log in to this web interface. The default user is Beef, B-E-E-F, and the password is the password that we just set in terminal. I'm going to hit enter to log in. And as you can see, we have the main user interface of Beef. The main thing you can see here on the left is the online and the offline browsers. In the online browsers, you'll see the browsers that are hooked to Beef right now that you can control. And in the offline browsers, you'll see the browsers that you previously were able to control. So browsers that you previously hooked to Beef. Now, in order to hook a browser to Beef and be able to control it and run commands on it, you have to get that browser to execute a specific JavaScript code. So if we go back to the terminal window here that started Beef for us and just scroll up, you'll see that it's given us the JavaScript code that we need to use to hook browsers to Beef. As soon as this piece of code gets executed on a web browser, you will see that web browser here in the online browsers, and you'll be able to execute a lot of really cool commands that will allow you to show fake login pages, it'll allow you to show fake updates, and even gain full control over the target system. Now, because Beef uses JavaScript, it'll work on any web browser that supports JavaScript, regardless of what device this web browser is running on. So it'll basically work on all modern browsers. So it'll work against phones, tablets, smart TVs, all operating systems used on PCs such as Linux, Windows, OS X, and so on. Literally any browser that can run JavaScript will be able to run this code, and therefore we'll be able to hook that browser to Beef and do all of the cool things that you will learn in the next lectures. So right now it really depends on you and your imagination on how you're going to get this piece of code to run on a web browser. If you're able to become the man in the middle, you can do DNS spoofing and redirect requests to a page that contains this hook code. Or you can inject this JavaScript in any web page that the target loads using the JavaScript injection methods that we learned once you become the man in the middle. You can also exploit an XSS vulnerability and inject this code in a vulnerable web page, and you will learn how to do that in the website hacking section. Or you can use social engineering and social engineer a target into loading a web page that contains our hook code. So all you'll need to do is think of a way to get a target to load a page that contains the hook JavaScript code. Now, in this lecture, I'm going to show you a very basic hook method that is really good for us to make sure that our system is working as expected. And this very page can also be used with method number 1 and method number 4, because we're going to have a HTML page that contains the hook code. Therefore, you can either DNS spoof targets to this page or social engineer them to this page. And once they load this page, the hook code will be executed on their browser, and therefore they will be hooked to Beef and will be able to run all of the commands that Beef allow us to run. So let's go back to Beef. And like I said, this is the code that we want our target browsers to load or execute. So I'm going to copy it. And I'm going to go and open my file manager. And I want to go to my web root. So you can either press Ctrl L from your keyboard or click in here at the path bar and just press the /. This will open a path text box where you can type the path that you want to go to. And I want to go to var www.html. Now, as we learned before, this is the location where the files for your web server are stored. And the index.html is the file that gets loaded by default when someone loads your IP in their web browser. So I'm going to right-click the index.html, and I'm going to choose to open it with a text editor. And I'm simply going to remove all of this and paste the hook code in here. There's one thing that I want to modify is the IP in here. I'm going to replace this IP with the IP of my Kali machine. As we learned before, you can get the IP using the ifconfig command. So I'm not going to do it right now. You should already know this by now. So I know my IP is 10.20.14.207. And that's it. We're ready to go. So if anybody now loads my IP address, which is 10.20.14.207, I will have a web server working on it, which will load the index.html by default. And when this file is loaded, it'll load the Beef hook code, and it'll hook that browser to Beef, which will allow me to run a number of really cool commands. Now, before loading this page, we need to start our web server. And as we learned before, we can do this by doing service Apache 2 start. And now my Apache web server is running. And if I go to my Windows machine in here and simply just go to the address of my web server, which is 10.20.14.207. Now, as you can see, we'll get a blank page. That's fine because our page contains nothing. But the code, you could actually have a proper HTML page and just put the hook code at the end or at the start. But this will do for testing for now. And if we go back here and go to the Beef interface, if we look at the online browsers, you'll see we have the IP address of my target, which is 10.20.14.206. This is the IP address of the Windows machine. And right now, if I click on it, you'll see I'll have a number of tabs in here, which will allow us to do various things. In the home, in the details, you'll see we have information about the browser of the target. For example, you can see that it doesn't have a VLC plugin installed. It supports WebSocket. If you scroll down, you can see the user agent, which is Mozilla 5. It's running on Windows NT 64-bit architecture. Again, if you keep going down, you can see the cookies, you can see the host name, you can see the screen size, and a lot of other information that can be useful when it comes to exploiting a target. At the logs tab in here, you'll see logs of all the events that happened in the browser, and if you execute commands, you'll see logs in here for these commands. The commands tab is the one that we're going to be using the most in the next lectures. This will allow you to run various commands on the target. Like I said, you can run information gathering commands. You can run commands to inject other JavaScript codes. You can run commands to steal passwords using fake logins. You can run fake updates and get your target to download the backdoor and hack their computer. There are a lot of really cool things that you can do, and I will walk you through some of the best ones in the next lectures. In the proxy tab, you can configure and use a hooked browser as a proxy. The XSS raise will show you if the hook page contains any XSS vulnerabilities, and the network tab will give you an overview of the current network. So right now you can see we have the target running Windows. We have his browser, which is hooked to Beef to us. And then from here, we'll be able to, like I said, launch a number of really cool commands that can be used to do so many things and further exploit the target system. Once done with using Beef, you can click on Log Out to log out, and then go to your All Applications, look for Beef, and click on Beef Stop to stop the service from running in the background. So that's it for this lecture.